good to be with you again. And this is a subject which I feel passionately about. And I believe in an infinitely wise creator who spoke and it happened. And I find it difficult to understand the viewpoint of those who wish to depart from that simple Bible truth. The Bible is quite clear that in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. So why should we want to think that the earth is billions of years old, unless it were that we accept evolution, which needs long ages of time? So we have to make choices. And the Bible class programme, Brother Bernabert had this little commentary on his Bible class programme. Once again, our community is being troubled by those who would seek to persuade us that mankind and the animal kingdom came into their present existence by an evolutionary process. This series will demonstrate that the whole Bible teaches that all living things were made in the beginning by God. And I do commend the Bible class committee for tackling this subject, because it is one that is of great importance, especially to our young people, because we're living in a country which is embedded into evolution. The BBC won't allow any debate on the matter, and the school curriculum won't allow any debate on the matter. So it's good to be able to put the other side. So what I want to spend the evening looking at is, first of all, making a few observations, and then looking at the alternative ideas to biblical creation, and then looking at what the evolutionary timescale really is all about, and then spend most of our time looking at Genesis chapter 1 and seeing what Genesis has to say and making that the basis of our understanding. And then very briefly at the end, just 3 slides, looking at some of the flawed assumptions which have to be made by those who would assume the earth is old. So, a few observations. The first observation is, whatever we believe, it requires faith. Whether we're going to believe in evolution or old age creationism or theistic evolution, and we'll look at what those mean in a moment, or whether we believe in what I term biblical creation, we need faith, because we weren't there. There was no man there. We either accept that God was there and has told us what happened, or we have to accept that there was nobody there, and we have to postulate from the things that we find what happened. So in both cases, it demands faith to believe either in the Creator or in the power of time and chance to bring about this earth. And what we believe, our belief, affects how we look at evidence. Belief in creation and belief in evolution will both look upon a world, hills and the valleys and the rivers and everything that is there, but from 2 different viewpoints. And depending on our viewpoint, we will see things differently. If we believe in biblical creation, then we'll be looking at a world through the viewpoint of God, the Creator, as revealed in Genesis. And we see a world of beautiful design, absolute complexity, wonderful colour, wonderful integration, and we marvel at the great power of God. But the evolutionist looks through the lens of naturalism, that nature is all that is. There is no God, and so we have to find explanations from the world of nature to understand how this world came into being. There is no God. We have to find natural causes. And he also uses this lens of empiricism, that if we want to know what has happened, then we have to go and we have to experiment, we have to observe. But our basis has to be on what we know now. And so the present is the basis for our interpretation of the past. And looking through those glasses means that we have to assign long ages, because you can't get from pond scum to man in a short period of time. It involves many, many different stages, and so there has to be long periods of time. So you're looking for evidence for a long period of time. Whereas wearing biblical glasses, there is no need for that. God said it happened. So a completely different time frame. And if we believe in old age creationism or theistic evolution, again we shall be looking through one eye with the Bible, but believing in evolution and the evolutionary time frame, we'll be trying to fit the Bible into evolutionary ideas. And as I say, our expectations do colour what we see. We can simply illustrate it. I pose the question, what is missing from that figure there? We don't have much audience participation, but hands up if you think that originally that was a figure 6. No? Or a figure 8? No? Oh, well, yes. How about a 0? Yeah, I've got a few more seconds. How about it was none of those? There is nothing missing. I drew an arc, I flipped it and spaced it. I made it like that. But because I said what is missing, then one tries to build up a picture to find some missing pieces, but they were never missing in the first place. I know it's a rather crude analogy, but that very much does sum up the difference between those who believe in creation, that God made it whole and complete, and the evolutionist who is desperately trying to find the missing pieces to try and build up a picture of what happened. And many confuse science and evolution. And so I take a quotation from the preface to Darwin's Origin of Species. L.H. Matthews in the 1971 edition had this to say: in accepting evolution as fact, how many biologists pause to reflect that science is built upon theories that have been proved by experiment to be correct? Or remember that the theory of animal evolution has never been thus approved. And he goes on to say, the fact of evolution is the backbone of biology. And biology is thus in the peculiar position of being a science founded upon an unproved theory. Is it then a science or a faith? Belief in the theory of evolution is thus exactly parallel to belief in special creation. Both are concepts which believers know to be true, but neither, up to the present, has been capable of proof. So that was written by not a Bible believer, but he could see that there was a world of difference between science, which can be tested in the laboratory and repeated around the world, and the observations and the assumptions which evolutionists have to make, saying that isn't science. Those are assumptions. It's a completely different ballgame. So our second area is to look at these different ideas to biblical creation. Biblical creation I used to describe a 6 days creation 6,000 years ago approximately. So what are the alternatives? Well, the alternative, the main one of course, is evolution. But then there is a variation on the theme of theistic evolution, which involves God working through the natural world and intervening where necessary to push things on, so that over long aeons of time we do go from pond scum to man. And then there's old age creationism. 2 variations. One, that the earth is very old, but then there was a localised creation, as described from Genesis 1 verse 2 onwards. I'll illustrate this in a moment. And then there is the other view of old age creationism, the gap theory, that the earth is very old, but it came to an end, and then there was a brand new start, as described from Genesis chapter 1 and verse 2 onwards, the gap theory. And Brother Parry, who's written a book on old earth creationism, which got there, has a chart which I just adapted here to show what the difference is. So theistic evolution says that Genesis chapter 1 and 2 describes time from the Big Bang, billions of years ago, up up to a creation of Adam and Eve, and then Bible history takes over. That's in contrast to Old Age creationism that says, yes, there was a Big Bang, and the life came into being step by step, as evolutionists postulate. But then when man came into being, when we get to the stage where there is Homo sapiens, God then intervenes and constructs a special Adam and an Eve, and in parallel with existing mankind, and life then flows on as explained in the Bible. The gap theory is a little bit different to that, subtle difference. Don't necessarily agree that there was a Big Bang, but there was a beginning, and if the beginning was billions of years old, well, so be it. Because whatever existed in the past came to a watery end, and God, in Genesis chapter 1 and verse 2, starts a brand new start on an old earth, which had life on it. Fossils are remains of that earth, covered in water, starts again, a total fresh start. So this brings us to our third section, which is to look at time scales. And I think at the end of it you'll appreciate why I have put this in. If we look at a 24-hour clock, we don't often see 24-hour clocks. The minute hand has to go around 24 times before the hour hand gets back to the same position. But there's a 24-hour clock, and divided into 60 segments, so they're clearly not minutes, but each one of those represents 24 minutes. And if we use this to give us a kind of time scale, so that if we put the Big Bang at midnight, 13.78 billion years ago, according to the evolutionists, and if you like that in longhand, that's what it all the noughts that are involved there. And then here we are now, 24 hours as it were later, and we can use that as a time scale. So where on that scale do we get life? Well, hang on, we've got to have the Earth first of all, and we've got to wait until almost 4 o'clock in the afternoon before ever we get the Earth, 4.6 billion years ago. And then we have to wait until about 5:30 in the evening to get our first life. Very simple life, but about 3.8 billion years ago. And then we have to wait quite a long time before we begin to get life as we recognise it. And so we have to go to an hour before midnight before we get what is termed the Cambrian explosion, about 500 million years ago, when suddenly there is an incredible explosion of life. All sorts of life suddenly springs into being about an hour before midnight, 55 minutes to be precise. And there's an absolutely stunning diversity of life found at that time. And we have to wait until 40 minutes before midnight before we get the first land vertebrae. So we just click those on. And then the next major step is the alleged age of the dinosaurs. And we've got to wait until 24 minutes to midnight for that. And we just slide the clock down a bit and we can put that on. So, so the dinosaurs, 24 minutes before midnight, when the dinosaurs allegedly come on the Earth 0.23 billion years ago. And then the next stage is the apes, and we're not now talking about minutes before midnight, we're having to talk about seconds before midnight. So again, we've got to enlarge the scale a bit. And the apes are appearing 38 seconds before midnight, 6 million years ago. But what about man? Well, before we have man, we have Homo, and then that's supposed to give rise to man. And Homo is 1.3 seconds before midnight. And, apologies, Homo is 12.5 seconds before midnight. And Homo sapiens is a mere 1.3 seconds before midnight. So, man, according to the evolutionists, has been on the earth for a very brief period of time. Tiny scale of human existence. And if you just go back to Brother Andrew's chart, you will see just how misleading these charts are. Because if we're postulating man just over a second before midnight, and then that represents the time period from the start of the Bible to the present, then all the other history is in 436 quadrillion seconds before when the Big Bang. So it just begins to appreciate what evolution is talking about. A huge period of time until we get to now. So let's now turn and look at what Genesis 1 has to tell us. Now, Genesis is telling us about what happened in the beginning. And we want to know when in the beginning was. Was it billions of years ago, or was it in recent times? Well, what are we told? We're told that in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, the two together. And the Apostle Paul, in Hebrews chapter 1, quoting from Psalm 102, verse 25, says, also talking about the beginning, and thou, Lord, in the beginning hast laid the foundation of the earth, and the heavens are the works of thy hands. So in the beginning we have not only God creating the heavens and the earth, but he laid the foundations of the earth and made the heavens. And the Ten Commandments, in talking of this time when God created the heavens, tells us that in 6 days God made what? Heaven, earth, sea, all that in them is, rested on the 7th day. Therefore God hallowed it. So as well as laying the foundation of the earth and making the heavens, he made the seas and all that in them is. Now Jesus tells us that in the beginning, have ye not read that he that made them at the beginning made them male and female? So we know that the time period of at the beginning also involved God creating Adam and Eve. And so we have to find a time frame for in the beginning which fits all those criteria. God making heaven, earth, waters, everything that is in them, man and woman. And tells us that he did it in 6 days and rested on the 7th day. So it is clear that in the beginning can't be stretched to billions of years. It has a time period. And we believe that what the Bible has to say is a record of truth. Now, what is often thrown at the Bible is, well, there are 2 accounts of creation, one in chapter 1 and one in chapter 2. Why are the 2 creation accounts? Well, we don't have any problems with there being 4 gospel accounts of the life of the Lord Jesus. We accept that each is writing from a different viewpoint. And so it is with this. There are 2 different aspects of creation being presented in chapter 1 and in chapter 2. Both are needed. In chapter 1, and it actually runs to verse 3 of chapter 2, is what we'll call the first creation account. And it tells us about God's preparation for his work of redemption, which is going to flow on from chapter 2, when man and woman has been created, then his work of redemption and revelation can begin. chapter 1 is dealing with making the preparations on an earth that was a fit place for man and woman to live in and to develop their faith. And the second aspect then is found in chapter 2 from verse 4 running through to the end. And this now focuses on God's working with man, and also is bringing in God's relationship to man and woman and God's work of redemption. And as you read through Genesis chapter 1 and Genesis chapter 2, there's a remarkable difference between the two. In Genesis chapter 1 we have the word Elohim used consistently from beginning to end. The angels, God's spirit power working through the angels, brought into being all the things that God had wanted. But when we come to chapter 2, it doesn't use the word Elohim, it uses the word Yahweh Elohim, the memorial name of God. And we can see how fitting that is, because now we have an earth that is all being created and all prepared. We're now working with man, and God is going to reveal himself through individuals and grant them the everlasting life that he possesses at the time prefigured by the seventh day of rest. So, what does chapter 1, which is what we're concentrating on, what does chapter 1 tell us? Well, I'm not expecting you to read that, though if you're at the front you probably will be able to. But in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And that's like an opening headline. That's what the chapter is all about, how God made the heavens and the earth. And the chapter comes to its conclusion, having gone through all the verses and got to the beginning of chapter 2. It then says, thus the heavens and the earth were finished and all the work of them. So we have an opening statement, this is what I'm going to do, and at the end, 30 verses later, we have that work was finished. And step by step, chapter 1 tells us how God achieved that end. And in the authorised version, at least, every verse, bar 3, begins with the word and, showing that this is a linking one with another. And in fact, in the Hebrew, every verse, apart from the first verse, starts with an and, indicating that this is a continuing unfolding of the steps that God took to go from creating the earth and the heavens to the finishing of them at the end of the 6-day period. And then God rested. And so at the end of this period, we have everything that was needed for life. We have earth, we have light, we have water, we have atmosphere, we have plants, we have planets and stars, we have birds and fish, we have mammal animals, and we have man. So everything's there. God can now begin his work of redemption amongst mankind. So let's look at the opening verses. What does Genesis tell us? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The stress, the earth was created at the same time as the heavens, not billions of years later. And the earth was without form, void, darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God hovered upon the face of the waters. So God created the earth without form, formless, void, empty, dark, and underwater. So there is a pristine earth. No hills, no valleys, just a plain sphere, covered in water, covered in darkness. And then, at the end of 6 days, we have an earth fully formed, hills, valleys, clothed with trees, filled with animals and fish, and man upon it. So it goes from being featureless to fully formed, from being empty to being full of life, from being dark to being light, from being underwater to having land and sea. How did that all happen? Well, God tells us, through his spirit power which brooded upon the face of the waters. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. Where did that light come from? No, the sun wasn't created until the fourth day. So there's only one source of that light, and that is God. And God produced that light which first shone upon the earth. And there's a wonderful lesson being contained in that, because wonderful though the sun is, which God created on the fourth day, and without that sun we would all perish, because it sustains mortal life, it causes the plants to grow and the animals can feed on the plants. We're utterly dependent upon sunlight, but it can only give mortal life, a brief existence, then we all disappear. But you see, God is saying there's something greater, a light that's greater than the sun. And that's the light that comes from me. And that light, the Spirit created light, is found in the Word of God. Now the wonder of the Word of God, it sustains not only mortal life, but it gives us immortal life. Because in its pages we find the message of life and the hope of life eternal, to being like God, having the same power and immortality that God has. This is of his mercy. But that's why God created the light from himself in the first place, to teach this lesson. The spiritual light is superior to the natural light. And God saw the light that it was good, and he divided the light from the darkness. Now, you can only be aware of that from space. So this is telling us that this is a record from God. It's only from space that we have appreciated the division that there is on the earth. Half the earth is in light, half the earth is in darkness. So it tells us this is from God. But it also teaches us another spiritual lesson, that the light that comes from the pages of his word, it is also able to separate between light and darkness, right and wrong. And God calls the light day. It's interesting, I haven't time to look at it, but it's interesting to go through and see the things that God names and the things that man names. And God names various things that he has complete control over, which man has no control over. So God calls the light day, and the darkness he calls night, and the evening and the morning were the first day. And that is implying, if there was an evening and a morning, that the earth was rotating, as it is today. And from the point of the observer on the far side of the earth there, in darkness, until the earth has turned halfway round, and then comes in light for the rest of the day. Now note that God starts in the evening. The evening and the morning were the first day. And to this day, the Jews keep their day. It starts at night time, 6 o'clock at night roughly, and runs through till the next evening. And again, God was teaching valuable lessons. There's so much based upon the natural, we can draw the spiritual lessons. That we're in darkness until we come to the light. We're not born in light. Our natural state is darkness. We have to come to the light. We have to turn to God and accept the light that comes from him. And the evening and the morning were the first day. So all that we've covered is all part of the first day. Now, in Hebrew, when we have a day and an adjective, then it always is a 24-hour day. And we know that Adam was alive, part of the sixth day and the whole of the seventh day. So this has to be day as we understand it. It cannot be long periods of time. True, the word day on its own can mean a period. In my day, the day of the Lord, not specific 24-hour periods. But when it's got first day, second day, it has to be that. And just a quick comment on that, this is a quotation from James Barnes, who died, but the time he spoke this, he was the professor of Hebrew at Oxford University. Probably, so far as I know, there is no professor of Hebrew or Old Testament at any world-class university who does not believe that the writers of Genesis 1 to 11 intended to convey to their readers the ideas that creation took place in a series of 6 days, which were the same as the days of 24 hours we now experience. And he also went on to say the Genesis writer intended to convey that Noah's flood was to be understood as worldwide and extinguished all human and animal life except for those on the ark, and that the genealogies give us a time frame to the flood. So that was the work of the first day. The work of the second day was to create a firmament. And the idea of firmament is a stretched out space. We can illustrate that by just putting around our globe what God did on the second day. He moved some of the water that was around the earth out into space, creating the expanse where birds fly and way beyond that. And we believe that that water out into space provided the water in the time of the flood that fell upon the earth for the 40 days and 40 nights. And its effect would be to make the earth a lovely warm place. It would shelter from the fierceness of the searing heat of the sun and cause the whole earth to be the same temperature throughout from top to bottom. Day 3 involves the creation of the land masses. Presumably by volcanic actions, some way God causes the land to rise up through the sea, and as the water rises through the sea, then the water would run off and carve out all the valleys and the canyons, the river valleys that we see today. And it would also lay down the non-fossil sedimentary layers, probably at that time. And that creation of land then provided the basis for the next stage, which was bringing forth plant life. So partway through day 3, we have the land appearing. So we've got the earth, we've got water, we've got light, we've got atmosphere, we've got dry land. Everything now is ready for the plants, which took place later on in day 3. It's all a logical sequence, all the steps that are needed to make somewhere suitable for life. And so we read in verse 11 that God said, "Let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself." And it was so. God spake, it was done. So these aren't little tiny seedlings springing up out of the earth. These are mature trees. And grass we would take covers ground covering vegetation. Herbs would cover the bushes and the shrubs, and the trees, obviously, the bigger trees. That is God's botanical definition of what he has created. But note the emphasis that everything is after its seed, brings forth seed, yielding fruit after its kind. Its seed is in itself. And this is the biggest challenge to evolution, because we know that is true. Grass is grass, grapes are grapes, apples are apples. But evolution depends on that not being true. That somehow things can change from one thing to another. That frogs can change into princesses. So this emphasis that the Bible has, it is so wonderful, because it has the ring of truth. We know this is true. So the earth is now ready. It's not only got the waters and everything there, but the land is now prepared. And we've got oceans around it, we've got soil, we've got rivers, and we've now got plants. And as God says, everything is very good. So if we'd been there at the end of that third day, we would have seen trees with fruit on. So a fully mature looking earth, but totally absent any life on it, just plants. So we're told that in day 4, verse 14, God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night. Let them be for signs, for seasons, and for days and years." Why now? Why wait till the 4th day to create the sun? Why not do it right at the beginning? Well, it is because God was wanting to teach us the spiritual lesson, as we looked at earlier. There is a light which is greater than the natural light, a light that comes from God. And sunlight wasn't needed until we come to the plant, until we come to the animals and the birds and that. Plants just need light. A simple source of light is what they need. But animals and man and the insects need other means in order for them to migrate and to travel and to navigate. And so God created not just one light to replace the light that came from himself, but lights plural. And this was the ideal way to do it. And what were they for to do, these lights? Well, they were to divide the day from the night. They were to be for signs, signposts, seasons, days, years. So, time. We need the sun and the movement of the sun's shadow being cast upon the sundial to be able to work out time. Signposts, the planets, and the stars, the North Star and the South Star, and give us navigational clues, and the insects and the birds and are able to navigate using, we know not how, but it is thought that some of the stars and that are even used by the insects in their navigation. So the sun marks out the hours, as I say, on the sundial. The moon marks out the months, the longer period cycle of the days of the month. And the passage of the earth around the sun then marks the years. So these were very important, the lights that God placed there. They were needed by what would follow. So this 4th day was the appropriate day to introduce them. And so we have sunlight, we have moonlight, and we have starlight. If there were no stars, then at night it would be very frightening, absolutely pitch black. But the stars, that's the clouds in the way, give that gentle illumination. And again, the moon gives gentle illumination. We can go to sleep. It doesn't disturb us. It enables the nocturnal animals to go their ways. And of course, the sunlight is so important to all life, to cause the plants to grow and to photosynthesize, to provide the food for the animal kingdom. And we're specifically told that God set them in their position in verse 17. God set them in the firmament of the heavens to give light upon the earth. And we know that everything is precisely right. The distance of the earth is from the sun is critical. The size of the earth in relation to the sun is critical. The distance the moon is from the earth is critical. And the size of the moon in relation to the size of the earth is critical. Everything is just right. So scientists use the term the Goldilocks planet. Everything is just right. And it's just right because God placed them there. And there is a precision about the heavens which absolutely astounds the astronomers. There's no Big Bang randomness in the heavens. Everything precisely placed by God. And then day 5 introduces us to the animals in the sea and the birds in the air. whales and everything that moves in the waters. So we have aquatic creatures, we have flying creatures, all reproducing after their kind. And their purpose, it was a simple purpose. It was to fill the earth. They had to be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth. Remember, the earth was created unfilled. Their task was to fill it, so that there was a background kingdom for man to live in. Animals there for him to feed upon, to look after. So God did these things step by step, building up to the climax, which is day 6, with the creation of the animals. A living creature after his kind. 3 categories of these, like there were 3 categories of plants: cattle, creeping things, beasts of the earth. So the cattle we would equate with the domestic animals, the creepers, the insects, and the beasts of the earth, the wild animals. And the very climax of the day was the creation of man. That was the pinnacle of God's creation. Everything led up to this step. But that's next week's subject, so I'm not going to trespass upon the creation of man. So what do we have at the end of the 6 days? We have a mature earth, trees, fruit on, birds laying eggs, hills, valleys, rivers, everything teeming with mature life. And so we have gone from an empty, featureless, dark, underwater earth in 6 days to a fully formed, full of life, light earth with land and sea and animals, plants, everything. And so finally we come to the 7th day, and the Sabbath was an important part of that creation week. God created in 6 days, but the 7th day was part of his creation week. It gave rise to the 7-day week, which is still with us. It pointed to the 7th millennium, the day of rest, which the Bible speaks about, when God's kingdom will be established, when the Lord Jesus will be here and in control, and all will be in harmony. And the kind of earth that God created will become a reality again. And men and women will be able to see what living under God's rule really is all about. And 7 is a simple symbol to us of completeness, based upon the mathematical law, and mathematical laws, like all the laws of sciences, are laws that come from God. If we take 7 circles, it doesn't matter what we take, whether they're coins, dinner plates, as long as they're all the same size, put one in the middle, put the other 6 round, they will each touch each other and touch the central one and create another circle. That's a mathematical law. It doesn't work with any other number, but it works with 7. Completeness, the circle. And so God gave man 6 days to do his work. But on the 7th day, he had to look to God. He had to have God at the centre of his life on that day and spend that day in worship to God. Now, we aren't under the Sabbath law. As believers, we have to make every day of our life impinge upon the things of God. Every day has to be a Sabbath day. So I believe in Genesis chapter 1 we have a very factual account. You don't need to be a clever person to understand it. It is straightforward, and in faith I believe it is true. And so I just want to conclude by putting just a few thoughts as to why the long ages don't add up. If man and animals have been living and dying for millennia before Adam came along, then it just negates the whole of Genesis chapter 3. Man introduced sin into the world. He didn't if death had been in the world for aeons before him. And was the earth very good? If you could go and see all these fossils, if they were laid down by a previous life, well, you could see them, so was everything very good? It makes much more sense the fossils were laid down at the time of the flood. And where is the evidence? We know the Bible tells us that there was a worldwide flood. Well, where is the evidence for it? If you start in the fossils and the sediments that were laid down. And the Spirit of God, we know when we come to the time of the Lord Jesus, and many miracles before the time of Jesus, but Jesus was able to take water and it turned into wine instantly. Now, world nature normally takes months to turn buds into grapes into wine, but Jesus was able to do it instantly. And so we believe that God at creation. It was a wonderful miracle. God said it happened, and instantly we had these things. Now, the assumptions that one has to make if one's going to believe in long ages of time is that you assume that there was nothing at the beginning, and we now have got what we have got from nothing until now. But that's not what the Bible says. That's what Genesis 1 says. God created a mature earth. It wasn't, the clock didn't start at a little tiny day-old baby, a little tiny seedling. It started mature. And the other assumption that has to be made is that the present is the key to the past. The only way we can understand the past is from what we see today. Now, the Bible tells us that what we see today was quite different. There was a huge flood and tremendous changes that were set in motion in that time. So we can't use those two assumptions, which form the basis of all evolutionary dating and that. We know from the Bible they are false assumptions. And the assumption that, well, everything must be old because it has to take a long time to make all these changes, again, we know that that's a wrong assumption because God spoke and it happened. And the problem with long ages is that, well, the human population fits a recent creation. It doesn't fit man being on the earth for thousands and thousands of years. The sediments on the sea floor fit with a recent creation. The moon, it's moving away from the earth. It's only 1 centimetre a year, which over 6,000 years is nothing. But over several billion years will be absolutely catastrophic, because then the moon will be so close to the earth that there could be no hope of life, because there will be huge tides. So again, it points to a recent creation. And coastal erosion, we know how much the coasts are eroding. Go down to Hunstanton, you can see in the lifetime I've been going down there 5 times. They've moved the fencing further and further away from the cliffs as they crumble away. Again, that's nothing. 20 feet probably in 40 years. But no, over millions of years, there shouldn't be any mass at all. And the level of carbon-14 indicates a recent creation. The Earth isn't billions of years old. And the fact that we find, as well as fossilised dinosaurs, we find fresh dinosaur bones, and we now have found fresh dinosaur blood, indicates there must be something very wrong in the aging or the dating of the age of the dinosaurs. Of how we have so many fossils which are completely unchanged over allegedly millions of years, exactly the same then, exactly the same now, again indicates there's something wrong with the basic understanding. Again, oil and coal, but they don't normally bother to date that because we know it's billions of years old. But when we do, it's only a few thousand years old. We find carbon-14 in buried diamonds. Well, there shouldn't be any carbon-14 there, long gone. And how do we explain that 70% of the Earth's crust is sedimentary, waterborne rocks, the other 30 are volcanic, which are pushed up through them. So, indicating the whole of the Earth was laid down with sedimentary waters. Now, the flood answers that question. But to think that time and time and time and time again, everything is all wiped out and another start, all wiped out, another start, just doesn't make sense. So I hope we can see that what Genesis 1 has to say is something reasonable and something we can accept and something we can trust in, because everlasting life depends on our acceptance as God the Creator and embracing the hope of salvation which lies in the pages of His Word.